Welcome, everybody, to our inaugural 2024, it's 2024, a CAR-PGA broadcast slash recording. I'm very excited that we are able to do this. It's been a long time coming. We took a break, and we have resumed our regular rhythm, which I'm very excited to say. Not only have we resumed our regular rhythm, we are actually booked out 6 months. So we went from sort of finding guests and sort of doing as we could to really being full steam ahead, which I'm very excited about. I'm Mike Tresca. I'm your host, and we are once again resuming the CAR-PGA orders of business. We have a very exciting guest. I'm very thrilled to have him, but we will get to that in a moment. In the short term, though, there's a couple of housekeeping items I just wanted to go over. And very simply, it's this. It's time to vote. So you're going to see in the next week a list of board members that are going to be running for your vote. We are able to have five, I believe, and I'll confirm this when the voting system goes out. I think we have six. So that means somebody is not going to get a board role. That's a long time coming. For a long time, we were only three, myself included. And it was really challenging to make a lot of decisions because we were running at bare minimum. That's a sign of health, and it's a good thing. Somebody may be disappointed. I understand that, myself included. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be bored on the board, but that's totally fine. I think it's a good thing. So very excited to hear that we have more than enough potentials for board membership. And then as a reminder, the committee chair, the role I currently hold, is actually determined from the board. So we won't know that. The board makes that vote after they're voted in. So, and we spent this month just asking people to submit their submissions if they were interested, and we will then proceed to doing the actual vote all next month. And for those of you who don't recall, we did send out the annual report for everyone to make sure they had an opportunity to see that and hopefully review our progress. I will tell you, our progress wasn't as good as we wanted. We tried to keep our Facebook membership to grow by one a month, which is really conservative. And I think we did that, but the YouTube channel did not grow quite the same. And certainly the membership, right? So our goal is to have our membership grow one a month, and we didn't achieve that. So I'd love to see 12 people a year and more. But of course, that's really depends on all of us. It's a group effort. These videos are part of that, but they are not the only means of doing that. Obviously, we have our newsletter, our website, and our social media. So once again, if you are interested and you're not a CAR-PGA member, we encourage you to join us. It's car-pga.org, O-R-G, and you can do /join-us. We will actually share that when we share this video. So that's our housekeeping. Speaking of our guest, I'm very excited to introduce Eloy Lasanta. Hello, Eloy. Let's see if we can pin you. There we go. Adding pin. Magic is happening.
Right. Hey,
Ta-da! It worked. It worked. Um, Eloy, I think this has been in the works for several months. We've been talking about this, right? We
yeah,
we sort
yeah.
of planned this out. Thank you for being so gracious to join us. It's hard. It's really weird how you try and plan something from the year before and then it feels like a century ago. Like I was really excited. I was like, that's in the future. And then I'm like, oh God, it's January. And then you're like, oh God, when did we talk about this? That feels
Yeah.
like
I'm
a
glad
long
you pinged
time.
me, honestly, because it's been forever. And my calendar updates are like, let me know the day before,
Yes.
and it's like, so I wouldn't have known about this until yesterday, had you not pinged me, last week and said, hey, are we still on? I'm like, I
That's
don't
from
know.
hard-earned experience. I've
This is
learned that the
crazy.
hard way. I didn't do it once, and you can watch it because I'm not going to name who it is, but it's in the videos where we just all talk to each other, which is actually good. We got a good turnout of folks. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Sometimes
have
I've
learned.
had panels at conventions where like it's like three people up on the panel and two people show up. We're like, then let's just all pull up a seat and let's just all have fun talking, right? We're not gonna like, oh, the three of us are better than
Right,
two. It's like,
right.
no.
No joke. And it's funny that you mentioned this. I'm having a flashback. I showed up to before I was doing podcasting, I showed up to a podcast panel to talk about sort of what we did from a video perspective, and I was the only one who showed up. And I never forget what some of the audience was like, "Are you going to talk about podcasts?" It was it was super awkward. So I've been there. I totally understand that. But yes, thank you for joining us. Uh,
Of course.
as I mentioned from the fabulous microphone you have, we it's clear you know what you're doing. So sometimes we worry about audio checks. None of those were a challenge, more my side than your side. So I'm excited to have you. And thank you again. So this is going to be we will never going to fit everything in that you're doing, but I do want to start. We try and ease everyone into this. Usually we do it. I actually, believe it or not, I got this from the D&D official podcast because they do it, which is really to just talk about your gaming background
Okay.
and then a little bit about the transition into what you're doing today. But give us the download on sort of your experience in being introduced to gaming and how it led you to there's a lot of things you do to what you're
Okay.
doing today.
So let me see here. Oh my gosh. So I'm Eloy. I got into gaming at the age of 13, which was over 30 years ago now. But yeah, so I got into it when I was 13. A friend of mine said, hey, check out this book, and because we're gonna get together with some of my friends. And I said, okay. So I read through the book and I was like, this is really fun. My favorite books to read when I was a kid were always like choose your own adventure books. I was all about like making choices and telling fun stories and stuff. But yeah, but my very first game ended up being Rifts, which the appeal of Rifts is fun because you can take from a lot of different worlds. Like you can be like, well, I want to play with some of the fantasy stuff, or you can want to play with some of the Rifts proper stuff, or bring in some of the, superhero stuff, bring in some of the, the Spawn stuff, so there's a lot of different stuff. The Ninja Turtles, you can bring in all the stuff. And you can kind of have fun mixing and matching all of the different stuff, but it all uses the same system, so it all kind of ends up working out in the end. With exceptions, but yes. But no, but that was actually my very first game, and I played that for I think a solid 6 or 7 years before ever trying anything else. And honestly, it was just because I didn't know anything else, and you know it was all there. Like there was a lot there. But of course, as soon as I was like, oh, what's this thing, Vampire the Masquerade, sure, I'll try. Oh wow, this is way different, and I like it even better actually. And then I tried some Steve Jackson games. Like Toon ended up being one of my very favorites. And I tried I and I am different than a lot of the people in the gaming industry at this point, because I think D&D was like my sixth game, that I tried, and I played it a couple of times, like back in the day. I'm talking second edition. I played a bunch of third, because everything was third around the D20 bubble. And I played some fourth, and played like a session of five. But like D&D is like not really my thing, which I think is it's different from a design standpoint, because I don't have a lot of those holdovers in my brain. But also just as a general gamer, like every time I have conversations with people, and it's like D&D is the default for a lot of people, and that is not the case with me. But I mean, that's my general gaming. But as soon as I started kind of branching out and doing and playing other games, I started to just want to kind of absorb every game that I could. And I've played hundreds of games now at this point, at whatever I can try. But one of the things that I do thank my first big gaming group with Rifts for was we had a round robin kind of GM setup. So one person would run, they would run, because we would do like all day sessions, right? Like we'd show up at 10 and we'd stop playing at like 10,
Remember those
right?
days when you had time to do that?
Oh, those are the best when you're a teen and stuff. You ain't got nothing
Yep,
better to do.
that's right.
But basically, it would be like we'd show up, we'd BS for a while, and then somebody would run for 4 hours, and then we'd BS for a little bit more, and then we'd run for another 4 hours, and then everybody would go home. Um, and nobody was allowed to just play, because everybody wanted to play. You couldn't just come and play. You had to be able to run stuff. You had to be able to create your own adventures. You had to be able to write up new magic items and know all the rules, and like you had to do that. And that was definitely something I thank my first group for like instilling that in me. And it made me take a more active place in my hobby that I had chosen. I could have taken, more passive and just kind of played. But also I think Rifts, because Rifts is hella complicated. And like I enjoy the fact that my very first game, and I tell people this all the time, I say, if your first game is a complicated game, it actually makes you enjoy other games that are simpler more, as opposed to the opposite. Whereas if you come in with a simple game, then you get faced with a complicated game. You're like, what is this? I don't have time to do this. But like almost nothing is as complicated as Palladium's system. So like most things are super simple for me to pick up just because I've played the most complicated game in my opinion. GURPS is slightly more complicated, but and Champions, I guess. But
Funny you mentioned that too, because I saw this recently where somebody was like, it started out there was D&D and there was nothing else, right? So you start out with D&D because that's all you knew, and that's why if you're a little bit past that, there's this sweet spot of explosion of games where then there's all these other really interesting. Some of them were sort of fantasy heartbreakers. They didn't consider themselves that, but they were at the time. But a lot of them were just somebody going, why isn't there D&D for insert name, right? So Call of Cthulhu, and obviously you get Star Wars and World of Darkness is all these amazing opportunities. But what is interesting nowadays is I guess a lot of people really define themselves as D&D only. But again, I was in that gaming zone too, and we played everything. Like we
yeah,
literally tried every game. Now, and they weren't all successful. My Star Trek character was like a disaster. I remember finding that game to be really not that exciting. We tried Car Wars with Auto Duel with GURPS. We tried Champions. We did have campaigns. D&D was one of the longest running. Champions was the other one. There was a Shadowrun campaign. But you just play like you just people showed up and were like, "What do you want to do?" And we would play because there was, I mean, for one, you had a lot of games, you had a lot of players. Because I always say that the two zones for gaming are lots of peers, nowhere to go, right? So that's high school
yeah,
and college and military, frankly. And by the way, prison is the other one we've discovered, right? So there's sort of like a select group of folks where you got don't have a lot of resources. Role playing is generally free, but it is interesting because Palladium fits in that sweet spot of a zone where I don't know how much play and opportunity it would get in different circumstances. Certainly now it's legacy and it's building on its legacy, but the Palladium, I actually wrote a letter to the Palladium. I wasn't to Kevin Media at the time, but I wrote and I got in a response because I was like, none of these games work right. I remember writing this like weird letter and they did. God bless them, they responded. But it is funny because it was the multiverse before the multiverse, right? So now it's all everywhere, and Rifts blew our minds in the concept of which, of course, was taken over from comics, and it was just a matter of role playing, trying to do it all, right? Because there was Torg and some other games that were sort of trying to do it, but Rifts was like a dragon with cybernetics on there.
yeah.
So I could see it, but you make a really good point, which is in some ways that was an incubator for game design,
I would agree.
which
Yeah,
I think that's fair. Exposure to a lot of games, playing a lot of games a lot, right,
yeah,
in an intense way. So how did that lead you to starting to want to make your own?
yeah.
And I don't know if that's a huge leap. Like I don't know if that was the natural progression or did that come later, or
It
how'd
honestly,
you
it
evolve?
really was. It was very natural. And just to point out too, like I've gone to cons, and there's a lot more D&D only players out there, but I've encountered Savage Worlds only players, cyber system only players. I've encountered those people, and I've even run into people who play my games, and they're like, "Your game's the only one I play," and I'm like, "No, play other games." Like,
What's
I don't
weird?
want to have that pressure on me. That's a
I went
lot.
to Gen Con a few years ago, bumped into a video game buddy. So I used to be in a league, right, for Halo. And he was like, I only play board games I was like, what?
At
He's
Gen
like,
Con.
I only go to Gen Con to play board games. And it was one of those things I was like, wait a minute. I, I guess you can just go to Gen Con to play board games. But I was like, really? Like
I
you
mean,
go to,
you
but yeah,
can, right?
it's just
Like
the
I would
different
I would if
universes.
I was gonna go for board games, I might go to like Dice Tower Con, or even Gamma.
There's
Actually,
so
Gamma is
many.
really big. Like when everybody's done at the floor, a lot of them go and play board games afterwards. Gen Con is a role-playing game convention, people. Anyway, I'm
That's what I
sorry.
thought, but I don't
um
want to shame anybody. It was just funny because I was like, oh, people come with
yeah,
their experience.
yeah,
And, in some ways, they either don't know any better or they didn't have someone to play with. I often find that's the reason. It's not that they wouldn't do it. It's just that nobody offered, so they'd never really get that far. And they just keep going. So, but yeah, so obviously you're a poly system. So sorry, you were starting to say how that put you
yeah.
on the path. Yeah.
I kind of did. I went away from that path. So what ended up happening was, I got really deep into the World of Darkness for a while there, just as a fan. Um, and joined a website that is no longer around called Ex Libris Nocturnus, which was like a fan site for the World of Darkness. Anybody who was on ELN, everybody, it was pretty big at the time. Um, it ended basically when they ended the first World of Darkness. But I basically became a member of that team and started doing. They started a zine, so they started asking for like writers to submit things like that would be compatible with the World of Darkness, and it would just be released on the site just for free or whatever. And I found that I was writing a lot of things for it, and I was putting a lot of effort into it. And then I was like, maybe I should try to get a freelance job, like, and actually get paid for it. That would be good. So I started sending out, went to open calls and did everything. I ended up getting my very first paid gig, which was for Witch Hunter: The Invisible World, which isn't a bad game. It's very World of Darkness ish. The designers were obviously inspired, which made it easy for me to grok the system, which was nice. That was my first gig, and then I ended up landing a game called Kid World, which was kind of a post-apocalyptic where like all of the adults are dead, so everybody's just playing kids. And I co-authored that one, meaning the main guy had the idea and I went through with him and we outlined it, got everything together, created all the classes. We did all this we did step by step, and basically we took an idea and turned it into an RPG. And I said, "Oh, that's all yet? That's all it is? I can do that." So I started my own company, Third Eye Games, and started publishing my own stuff. Because as soon as I knew how to do it, it's nothing. That's honestly it's a big deal. Like, and nowadays not that bad. I'm talking, late 2000s. It's a lot easier nowadays to kind of just look it up. How do you make an RPG? Like, it's whatever, but like back then, like PDF, when I released my first game, API, Apocalypse Prevention Inc., like PDFs were like a new thing. Like drive through RPG had just kind of come out. Like, it was not where we are nowadays, obviously. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just I saw that there was money in publishing and I could still just be as creative as I wanted to. And I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to get out there that I felt only I could necessarily execute them in the way that I saw them, as opposed to, kind of working with somebody and having their input and whatnot. I'm very egomaniacal that way. So I was very much like, I'm just going to start my own company and release my own stuff. And, luckily for me, it's gotten me this far and it's opened up a lot of other opportunities for me, kind of along the way.
I mean, you have a significant catalog. So how long has the company been around? The Third Eye Games?
2008 was when I started the
2008.
company, and I think I released the first book like pretty much like late 2008 because I spent some time, refining it and whatnot. Yeah.
That's interesting too. I mean, you talk about the PDF revolution. It is one of those things I was like, man, does that have it has so many ripples on how it affects publishing in general.
Mhm.
Certainly game publishing, partially because of well, there's a lot of things. First of all, not a physical space, so not taking a shelf. So a lot of the things when you're now obviously you've made print versions of games, but when you don't have the print version as a concern, there's a little bit of a different life cycle, right? So you're dealing with long tail of if the product lives forever, or potentially as long as digital and whatever PDF lives on the internet, how do you manage that? It's interesting because I think for a long time, which is the Coast struggle with this, which was in some ways you start to compete with if you're around long enough, you start competing with your old versions because people are like, you know what, I don't like this version.
Yeah.
I'll just keep using the other one, which is fascinating because that's a different world we live in now. Where obviously with the print version, you sort of deal with whatever's on the shelf, and I guess you can keep your old book, but that's it. Now you're like anybody can go buy that one, and I can tell my friends to go buy it, and we'll all play that version, which we hear more and more often. So that's one thing for sure. The other thing, of course, being the world of search engine optimization and digitization matters way more than it used to. My favorite thing with just even publishing novels was how little the cover shows up the way you see it when you print it, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to see this thing about this big. Well, guess what? 80% of the time, it's this little thumbnail about this big on the internet. So that's your bookshelf. That's your
Yeah.
book spine. That's the way people engage. So design your covers to be something that somebody can look at from a distance and go, that's interesting because,
Yeah.
that just the art alone changes. So the PDF world, it's, I mean, especially for younger folks new to this, I think really blew open a lot of opportunities and came with its own challenges. Obviously, you've navigated them well. And congratulations because you've got quite a few significant games under your belt.
I've
If you had to
also had a
choose,
lot of I've also had a lot of help along the way.
of course.
Just to throw that out there, I did not figure this stuff out by myself. It was a lot of trial and error, and people who were kind enough to not say this is trash, and instead they would say, "Hey, you in your PDF, you need to include the cover art." And I'd be like, "Oh, wait, how do I even do that?" And then I had to spend a while figuring out how to use Acrobat. It's like, nowadays it's nothing, right? And I do tons of layout all the time nowadays. But like, I remember when something is new, it's just like, what's going on here? Anyway, sorry,
Funny
I didn't
that
mean.
the pendulum, no, no, absolutely. And the pendulum switched back now, where now everything's a work in progress. I mean, this is the other problem, right? Now it's like no game's really finished. Good news, if you stay on top of it, you can update it quickly and send a new version out to your, backers slash customers. Bad news, everything is sort of, you know, never really finished. You sort of launch and go, we'll wait for feedback or whatever. And that's a challenge too, where what's a final product of anything when it's digital and is malleable and can be changed? Print forces a decision.
Yeah.
But the digital world, you can be like, new edition coming right up.
Well,
So,
I would say yes and no. I don't see very many people releasing like PDF only things.
mhm.
I think because the expectation from the customer is that there will be a print version available, even if it's just as like a keepsake. Or what you said, right? It might be that the customer doesn't feel comfortable purchasing a tabletop RPG if there's not some sort of commitment, like we are going to have a print version, because that does mean that the designers have to make that final decision and put it in print, right? But so I would say I've not seen that. Hopefully, it doesn't happen. But I also have a personal rule. I only have three of my games. Three of my games have second editions, and it's because the first editions, essentially I reach a certain point where I'm playing my own game and I'm like, I'm not having that much fun anymore. Like, I feel like this should probably be like this and this should be like that. And
Mhm.
like, I just ensure that a second edition is not just because, if we follow D&D and whatnot, they have a new edition every 5 years. It's just how it works. Whether it's better, whether it's worse, whatever, it's every 5 years because that's what they need to do in order to keep their, money and power.
Right.
I have made the choice to only do a second edition of something if I find that it needs it. And so far, like I have other games and I'm like, no, they work just fine. It's like
Yeah.
these don't need second editions, so I'll just move on. But yeah, so that also comes from like I also iterate a lot. So like I'll have different versions of even the same system in different games. So it's different people do just stuff different ways. Um, but anyway, edition wars is a real thing. And I even still have people telling me that they like the first edition of some of my games, and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, I made the second edition for a
Well, that's
reason.
a
It's
wrong
way
opinion.
better. Like, I'm the designer, and I'll tell you the second edition's way better. Like, I made it that way for a reason.
Well, let's use Part-Time Gods as one example. So, can you speak a little bit to that and sort of speaking of second edition,
Yeah,
what the evolution of Part-Time Gods was?
sure. I mean, Part-Time Gods, funny enough, Part-Time Gods was the first idea I came up with for an RPG, but ended up being my third game that I ended up releasing because I couldn't figure out how to make the powers and the mechanics work the way I really wanted it to. Like, I had a vision, but I didn't know enough. Like, how do I make that a thing that with mechanics that actually like work well? So I ended up releasing two other games, API and Ninja Crusade, before Part-Time Gods. But when I released Part-Time Gods, the game itself it's pretty solid, right? It's the first edition. It's a solid game. But what I found is the further I got in my game design and the more I learned, and this is something that I teach as well, is that basically you have to have a certain purpose-driven mechanics design that whatever you say the game is, there needs to be something behind that. It can't just be a suggestion. And that's something that I learned, like I said, along the way, running my own game, playing my own game, and also playing a lot of other games that I would notice would do exactly the same thing. Vampire, we've mentioned Vampire a few times. It's a great example, right? Because Vampire is just like, oh, it's about political intrigue and all that stuff. And I'm like, no, it's about superhero vampires. It's really what it's about, right? There are no mechanics for social interaction or for going to a party. There's no harpy mechanics, there's no reputation mechanics. I'm like, there's
Mhm.
nothing there in the system to tell me that this has to be a part of the game. So when I was going through Part-Time Gods first edition, and I talk a lot about it in the first edition. I talk about maintaining your divine territory, and I talk about like your day job is going to come and intercede, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then like I said, just kind of going through, and as the GM, I could force those things, but there was nothing that the game said these things needed to happen. So when I designed the second edition, I added two kind of core things to the game. One was an actual territory map that you actually do have to like keep track of, like what parts of your city belong to you and where is your power concentrated and where would the bad guys be and all that stuff. Really, really fun stuff. The other one that I added was a free time mechanic. So essentially, after every new scene that you get into, you have to spend free time to go do that. And then eventually you'll get down to free time zero, and then that is when your real job or your family or some sort of other responsibility comes into play. So it's basically, it becomes kind of a ticking clock. And that was a huge deal. Both of those changes, in addition to changing the entire system for dice rolling for that game too, but that's neither here nor there. That was more just because I really like that system. It was a system I designed for Ninja Crusade, and I was like, I'm going to use it for Part-Time Gods now. But those two things, the map and the free time, those are the things that really make Part-Time Gods second edition really sing. And because the whole conceit of the game is your regular person who has become a god, so you have to balance your mortal and your divine responsibilities. And the way it was designed originally, it was, you have all of these divine responsibilities, and if the GM really wants to push it, then you have to deal with your mortal ones. But now it's like, no, you really have to you have to deal with all of it. And again, it's whatever it says on the package, the game has to be able to deliver that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, this is the thing I think so many people struggle with, which is, you do a page count on what the game tells you about, and
Mm-hmm.
you're like 30 to 70% of it was combat.
Yeah.
And so then people like stop fighting everything. And you're like, well, okay, but that's what the system has in there. I had a World of Darkness campaign, and to your point, after a while you were like, wait a minute,
I
there
don't
were
have to
some
do any of
pieces, but
this.
yeah, you actually it's not part of the game. So and certainly I think now it's a different conversation. People have definitely sort of realized this and seen it as a thing that the game should do what it says it wants to do and hopefully encourage, maybe can't mandate, but encourage certain kinds of things. And I think that's it shouldn't be revolutionary, but often it is, partially because role playing is so fungible.
Yeah.
I'll never forget one time we had been playing together, my buddies and I, for probably 4 years straight, same characters, and somebody came in who was new, and they just role played their characters around the table for like
Yeah.
2 hours, 3 hours, and it was one of those things you were like, I don't think we need D&D
Yeah.
actually. And it was such a fascinating point though, because you were like, oh, all these really cool social things that are happening is actually not. because of D&D, actually. It's not because of the rule set. It's because we've sort of created some kind of subset of rules in our heads and how we engage with each other, that allows this. But of course, that covers a lot of things, mechanical sins that you go, oh, actually, the rules don't cover any of that.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, intentional game design is a huge piece of that. So you obviously kickstarted successfully the
Yeah.
second edition. How was your now? It looks like you've been experienced with Kickstarters before,
Oh
obviously, for
yeah.
Part-Time
Oh yeah.
Gods, among other things. So what's your, crowdfunding is a little bit less of a shocking thing nowadays. It's sort of part of the, I think, the tool set. But what's been your experience with sort of how you engage on that?
Here's the interesting thing about Kickstarter is that I think like the third like person to like use Kickstarter for an RPG.
Wow, wow, that's
Because
terrifying.
there were a couple of like kind of successful ones, and I was just like, let me try. And actually, my very first Kickstarter was for the first edition of Part-Time Gods. And I think I got like 8,000 for it or something. Like I was like, damn, that's a lot of money. At the time, like this was before like, millions have been made on Kickstarter, because even Kickstarter was a new thing back again. This was what, 2010. Like this is like nothing. It's crazy. Um, so my game was like the third one, and then the one that was after mine was Daniel Solis's Doe,
Mhm.
which I think got like 25,000, which was a ton. Everybody was like, "Oh my god, he got 25." Oh, like that was a big deal at that time. But what ended up happening was, because I had a successful Kickstarter around that time, I kind of became like, I got grandfathered in as like a Kickstarter expert,
Oh, wow.
which was nice, because I
Hmm.
got a lot of people coming to me and asking me like, "Oh, what do you think about this? And can I get some tips and whatnot?" And I'm like, "Hey, I don't know. I just tried I just threw some stuff up there. I don't know." But honestly, since then, I've done like 15, 20 Kickstarters. Like I'm usually successful. I think we pulled one down, but I don't think we've ever like failed one. Actually, we've pulled down two and like readjusted and put them back up. But I mean, but for the most part, like Kickstarters are, as long as you have kind of what you're looking for, you have a good pitch, you have a good fan base. I always say like Kickstarter should not be anybody's first thing, even though it is for a lot of people. You can do it as your first thing, but if you do it as like your second or your third thing, you're going to be a lot more successful, just because people know who you are and can like trust that you're going to put something at, like, but I mean, honestly, yeah, ever since the first edition of Part-Time Gods, every one of my games has ended up somewhere on there. I think except for Sins of the Father. Sins of the Father was one that ended up not getting a Kickstarter for it. That's a special case though, because um with Sins of the Father, that was one I had been working with like teams of writers and everything for like years, and I missed the days when I would just sit down and just write a game. So Sins of the Father was like, I just sat down for a few weeks and I just made a game that was just me, and I didn't have any other writers involved, and I had an editor obviously, but like it was just me. And so I was like, I don't need a Kickstarter for this. Like it's just whatever it's me, right? I don't have to pay people, because that's what I do Kickstarters for. I do Kickstarters to make sure other people get paid. Like, because I'm gonna make the games regardless. Like, like whether the Kickstarter is successful or not. Like, usually I already have the game done. So like I'm gonna release this thing. I just did one. My last Kickstarter at the tail end of last year, I did for my next album, and I was like the same thing. I was just like, the music's done, so like the album's gonna come out, but do you want an early copy? Do you want to have your name in the liner? Like, there's extras to be had. But like that, even if it had failed, which I'm luckily it didn't, it's gonna come out. Like that's how I treat Kickstarter. Not everybody treats Kickstarter that way. Some people are like, oh, I'm pinning all my dreams on Kickstarter. If it doesn't happen, then I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, nah. Kickstarter is a fun tool, but it should not be your hammer. To for every nail.
Well, and the phrase we use is, should be a kick finisher, right? That's the thing, is sort of, it would be great if people came to it
Yeah.
and then sort of maybe polish it or what to your point, but not that you come in and go, boy, I hope this works. I don't, and there's a lot of people because there's a lot of money now, $1 million Kickstarters that they're the hopes and dreams are right there. You mentioned so you're a multi hyphenate, you do everything, and
I
it's pretty
try.
clear. Yeah, he try. He's like, I can't help it if I do a couple different things. So, but I assume partially what comes with that is your ability to cultivate an audience and a following. And I think that's probably served you very well. Sounds like in the
Yeah.
crowdfunding space. My favorite thing about you is Prince's friend, known as Prince's friend. My
Ah,
wife is a huge Prince fan. But tell us a little bit about sort of something. It doesn't have to be Prince, although we probably could do that and just spend the rest of the time. But tell me a little bit about sort of some of the other things you do and how that's helped you sort of really engage with because I don't think it's unique to gaming, right? I mean, maybe there's a passionate group, but certainly, audience engagement and cultivating fans and connecting with people is universal. So, what's been your experience with that? You do a lot.
I mean I do. I try to keep myself busy. And I'm lucky enough that my wife has a higher paying job than I do and has allowed me the freedom to just kind of be the creative person who I pay some of the bills, but I'm not 100% responsible for like everything, which is nice.
Yeah.
Um no, I mean, so I mean, I obviously I've been doing publishing since 2008, but I've been, doing gaming since I was 13. I got into Prince though when I was 11, so like that was, obviously that was my first love was Prince's music. And after he passed, I ended up just going onto YouTube and just wanting to just like talk about my love of Prince's music and why I was sad that he was gone and all that stuff. And it just so happens that, when you're online and you're like honest and you don't mind sharing a piece of yourself, uh some people will jump on board and be like, yeah, I feel the same way. And I went and I started with a channel that, with nothing. Now we're over 30,000. But it's a very niche channel, so it's not like for everybody. It's not like one of those general channels that can get to millions and, hundreds of thousands of followers really fast. It's like, and there's other Prince channels out there. Anyway, but I really love talking about Prince, and honestly doing the Prince's Friend YouTube channel, it opened me up to being able to learn how to do video editing, how to do sound stuff, and kind of buying a bunch of my equipment that I have here in order to do all of those things. Um, Going from there, honestly, my love of Prince and everything kind of then made me go into music, obviously. And what I learned from that aspect was honestly that all of my game design thoughts and stuff, it made music kind of easy because you immediately start picking up like the different patterns, and you're able to pick up like basically how to game the system and how to like, oh, okay, so you go this, and then that's what makes a song. And then here it needs to have this, and then here it needs to have that. Like I end up nowadays as a musician being a lot more fascinated with different arrangements of music than I even am of like, expert guitar skills or whatever. I'm just like, wow, that's a really cool, like the way this transition to this and all that stuff. Like I'm much more fascinated by that stuff. But I've been able to kind of take everything that I do because I do those things. I also do some screenwriting. I recently got into writing for video games. That I have a couple of games that should be out pretty soon here, hopefully. I have a couple of video games, and I'm still looking for more video games jobs, except that industry is like it's crumbling right before us. But that's a whole other conversation. But honestly, yeah, it's one of those weird things because it's not even something that like that I can say like I know exactly how I do it, right? It's I've always been very open. I try to be very friendly, and I told I my mom used to tell me when I was younger was just like, if you're just always telling the truth, then you don't have to remember your lies. It's like, it's just like just always tell the truth and you're going to be fine, right? So
Right.
I mean, so that's what I do. I talk a lot about the things that I love. And I have people who strongly agree with me, strongly disagree with me, but they understand what I'm doing and why I'm saying the things that I'm saying. I think my favorite recent addition to that long list of things that I do, in addition to like being a husband and father and all that stuff, is I started teaching RPG game design, which is like a huge gift. That was one of those things, and we can get to freelance stuff. Like I remember one of the questions was going to be about freelance stuff, but that's a
Mm-hmm.
whole other thing. But like the teaching, I do it in conjunction with Central Michigan University and Gen Con, because they, a few years ago, I think we're going into year 3 now, they had said, well, we kind of want to start this like collegiate, excuse me, level like game design course. And they were like, we need people to teach it. And I had just recently got onto a team full of some really A-list people, and they got contacted, and then they said, is anybody on the team interested in doing this? And everybody was like, I just don't have time. And I'm like, well, I always have time. I am never without time because I get to make my own schedule. Like if it's something that I want to do, I'll just make it happen. I'll do it. So I contacted them and they said, well, what would you want to maybe teach? And I said, how long's the course? They said it's going to be a 6-week course. And I said, there you go. There's a whole syllabus right there. And they're like, wow, like, okay, I guess let's do it. Right. So I've been doing that now for, like I said, 2 years. Yeah, we're going into the third. And the first course that I came up with was more of a 101, right? It was kind of like a how to take your idea and kind of make a game out of it. And that went so well that I had a bunch of the students who were asking for like a 201. So then I created basically how to go from an alpha kind of game into like a full on like beta, like ready almost for publishing. So, now I teach 2 different courses. I teach one at the beginning of the year and then one at the end now. So it's been a fascinating thing, but I love the ability to uh pass on all the stuff that I've learned in terms of game design. And I get people who come into the class and they have this whole idea of what it means to design an RPG. And when they're done with my course, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the head or anything like this, but like when they leave the course, the majority of them are like, I seriously thought you were crazy at the beginning of the course, but like it made so much sense once we were at the end. It all made sense and it's awesome. And I'm just like, yeah, so now you think like me and it's awesome. I want more people to think like me because again, I'm atypical when it comes to most game designers because they have
Mm-hmm.
their roots in different things.
Right.
And not everybody is as interested in experimentation as I am. Every one of my games was me trying to fill a niche and trying to experiment and challenge myself. Even that game that I said earlier, Sins of the Father, when I said, well, I'm going to sit down and write a game. I mean, I could design a game like that nowadays. And I'm not trying to be conceited or anything, but like I've been doing it for long enough that I can design a game pretty easily.
Right.
But my challenge in that game, for instance, was I want to make it where the system uses cards, like a deck of cards instead of dice. Like that was a big deal for me because I'd never done that before, and I still have not done it since because that was really hard. It was really hard to make one that was like really well done. Like, because you can again, it's almost like music. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, it's easy to write a song. It's really hard to write a good song. But
Yeah.
anybody can write a song like la la la. It's a song right there, right? Do you want to hear it again? No, you probably don't. So but yeah, but it's the same thing with games, right? It's there are a lot of games out there that I play, and we were talking about this before, where like we like to jump to different games. A lot of the if somebody tells me that there's a bad game, I often want to play it because I want to see where the system got away from the designer. Like I'll read the book and I'll be like, I get the conceit, I understand what I'm supposed to be playing here, and then I'll play the system and I'll be like, oh, I immediately identify where the system got broken and where the choices were made, and then like, oh man, they could like this could have been good if they had done this and that. but also I like to do a lot of like mining, for like inspiration and ideas for myself. Like I'll play a game that is terrible, but I'll be like, there's that one little nugget there though that's pretty cool. Like I wonder if I could take that and kind of add my spin to it and figure out, if there's something else there that I might be able to do with it. Um, just because it's game design is fun. I think I just posted it on my Facebook, and stop me at any moment. I ramble. I just posted on my Facebook, I think a couple of days ago, because I'm working on a script right now. I'm working on a script with a friend of mine who's a director, and we're working on a script again. Who knows what's going to happen to it, but I'm like, let's work on it. I'm outlining and doing stuff, and as I'm outlining and I'm building the world and stuff, my brain keeps going like, this would make a cool RPG. And I'm just like, no, stop it, brain. Like,
Turns
it's
out
like,
setting Bible work has a lot in common with role-playing
it
game work, we've
really
discovered.
is.
It
It's
does. I
super,
know it does.
it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. And I'm just like, because really that's how I got started, is everything that like I saw, like I was like, I want a game that does that. So then I don't wait, for somebody else to make it. If it's not already made, this is a rule, because I mentioned before, like I either am experimenting and challenging myself or I'm filling a niche. Most of my games are because I said, wow, wouldn't that kind of game be cool to play? And then I do a search and I see if that game exists. And if it does, then I play that game because I wanted to play that game. But if it doesn't exist, then I feel compelled to make that game. So that's just me. Ninja Crusade was the biggest one, right? Because that was my second game. And I remember I was just like, man, it would be, I got just gotten into Naruto a lot because I was watching it a lot with my middle kid. And we were watching a lot of Naruto. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if there was a game where I could play kind of like in this type of world and do these types of things? And I scoured the internet, and there still to this day aren't any like very focused ninja games. There's lots of games where you can play as ninja in a collection of other things. But like I think there's Ninja Crusade ended up being the first like ninja RPG, which is the dumbest thing. I don't know how it's the first one. That's like it's perfect for like games. It's so dumb
Right.
that mine was the first. But since then, there's been a bunch that have come out afterwards, and they're actually really good. So I'm happy that it's not the only one in its genre anymore. But like it kind of was the first one because that's what I do, right? When I made my first kids game, Mermaid Adventures, it's because same kid, by the way. That kid is trouble when it comes to getting me to
Or
but he was
inspiration, depending. Yeah.
yeah, he was really into mermaids at the time, and I was wanting to get him into gaming. And I was like, well, let me find a kid-friendly mermaid game to play. Not one. So I was like, I guess let's make one. It's like let's do it.
Like
It's
being a
it's
parent and going, the heck did it happen? Because you're like, I remember as a kid, I thought these games were great. And then you're an adult, and you're like, no, that's not going to work.
mm-mm.
No, that's not going to work. And it's always becoming a parent. And obviously, that's we're sort of past that, but that generation now, all the kid gamers who became parents themselves, and they were like, oh, I want to teach my kid these games, and they go, this is not going to work. And then, like you said, there was this wave of kid-friendly games as they realized that you can't. You can just take a
Yeah,
game and throw it at the kid, which people do. We've all tried it, but you probably should think about because kids being approaching things differently too. Again, designing for your audience. So,
yeah.
now I'm not, again not surprised Mermaid Adventures came out from your
Yeah, and
side. I'm not.
it was one of those games too that like, um, God, like I'm not trying to make myself sound like I'm like a pioneer or anything, but like I think it was Mermaid Adventures and like Hero Kids, like those were like
Yeah,
the two out like
and
at
that
the
was
same
it. Yeah.
time, and
Hmm.
Hero Kids was a lot more D&D friendly, so it got picked up a lot more and a lot more people were playing it, but like it was those two, and then like what was it, My Monster, like that's an old John Wick game,
Right.
like so like it was like those three games for like the longest time in kids gaming, and then I started just making more kids games, and then a bunch of kids games kind of were coming out afterwards. I actually wasn't the first in that genre, but I think Hero Kids came before me. But like I'm just saying, but what was but it had gotten to the point then then they had to make a family category, a family gaming category at the Ennies. So then it was like that sort of thing. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I'm sorry, I'll stop because I think you said that we needed to open up stuff for questions too. So
I know so a few things that I would just add as we start to wrap this up. One of them is that, I don't think one medium can contain you. I think your creativity knows no bounds, which is right. I think, and I think in the age of the internet and the age of, frankly, there's many, there was a wave of articles. Journalists were just in love with the idea of let's show who plays D&D in Hollywood, but
yeah,
I think it's not as strange as people think. I think at this point, I love to do 6 degrees of RPG. With most popular shows, that we can almost always find evidence that somebody was a gamer and sort of this was their campaign and that was tied to this or whatever. But I think it absolutely you are a creative force, which is absolutely fantastic to watch and witness. And man, I'd love to see you go. It's fantastic to see you just
yeah,
unstoppable is the way I would characterize you. So I really admire that. That's a lot. So, and we can't cover it all here because, like I said, easily this could be a 3-hour conversation. Um, what is up? First of all, where can we find you? And then what is coming next for you? And then we'll
yeah.
open it up for questions.
So thirdeyegames.net is that's the main. Yeah, if you type in .com by accident, you'll still get to me. But the proper address is still .net. Because when I first started the company, .com was like somebody else already owned .com. And I think I owned .net for a good decade, and then somehow that .com became available, so I just scooped it up. So now I just have one. It just redirects. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So thirdeyegames.com, or just at Third Eye Games and pretty much all over social media. If you want to look up you should definitely go check out Central Michigan University and their applied game design courses. I'll get you a link. I don't have it like
Please,
on me,
we'll
but
put it in the
Central
newsletter. Yeah.
Michigan University. I believe my next course is going to be June, so it's going to be a summer course, which hopefully will open it up. It'll be our first actual summer course that we're trying with this program, so maybe it'll open it up. Maybe we'll get more people who will come in. That'll be fun, and I believe it's intermediate game design, the second part that I'm going to be teaching. And it's fine if people want to jump in, like if they didn't take the first one. It's more just kind of expanding on it, like essentially come already with an idea for a game. The first one is more like, do you even know what you want to make? It's like, it's
Yeah.
like, well, I'll walk you through it. It's fine. So you can definitely go there. You can go to straysoftheworldmusic.com or just look up Strays of the World on any of your music streaming platforms if you want to check out my music. It's alternative rock with a little bit of funk, and I have a new album called Disaster that's coming out this year. My first single off of that album is going to be out next month, called Breakdown Breakup. Fun stuff. What else do I do? Oh, you can check out the Princess Friend YouTube channel, obviously. You can go there and check that out. And I'm not gonna. Well, I guess if you go to stream, what is it? Stream, right? That's the video game thing. Stream. If you go to stream, 2 games that I worked on, that I did the dialogue and all of like the narrative design for. One is called Subterrane 2: The Mines of Titan. Go check that out. The other one is going to be called Dream Tactics. Both companies, both developers were really awesome to work with and gave me a lot of freedom. So like those games are like very much, they're as much me as they are the actual designers of the game. And I'm very, very proud of those projects. So those, I was told Q1. I don't know what that means. I don't know. I mean, I know what
Uh,
Q1 means.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
what that means. It's actually coming out Q1 is what I'm
Right,
saying.
right. Yeah, that's great.
um, I think that's a pretty good list. There's more stuff,
Well,
but
the
I'm gonna stop
screenplay. What
there.
what happened to the screenplay? What's going on with
Screenplay.
the?
Okay, we're
I
we're
mean, you
pretty
probably don't have
early
anything
in the
yet, but
process.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
pretty early in the process. I probably shouldn't talk too much about that one. But it's modern day and it's like modern fantasy sort of stuff. So there's magic and vampires and stuff like that.
Nice.
So it should be fun. I'm excited for it. Again, it might even just end up being a passion project with me and my friend, and it never goes anywhere. But it would be nice if it went somewhere because I'm already loving what we've come up with. It would be amazing. It might end up becoming an RPG if we can't make it into an actual show.
Everything's an RPG if you try hard enough.
Exactly.
Especially in with Hollywood these days.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. So, like, look, there's like I said, we could easily go for another 2 hours because there's so many different. We could just talk about any one of those. But I do want to open it up. We have some folks on who joined us. So, anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Eloy?
Yeah, this has
Yeah,
been
man.
awesome. I'm really excited. Congrats on the new album that's coming out.
Thank you.
And I'm curious, what are you most excited about in the gaming industry, and what are you doing about that?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I think for me, a lot of the beauty of the industry that I'm seeing right now is that we're getting a lot of like different voices that are being seen. When I won my first innie, um, and I'll keep the story brief, but when I won my first innie, I found out that I was actually the first like black man to like get up on stage and accept, like, not Mike Pondsmith, who had been doing it for generations before me, not Jerry Grayson, who is an amazing, game designer, but like me. I was the first black dude to get up on stage and accept an Emmy, which kind of blew my mind. And I ended up starting a company with Jerry Grayson and Misha Bushyeager, and we started. It's called New Agenda Publishing, where we were starting to kind of try to elevate more, you know, people of color and whatnot, trying to elevate those voices. We ended up coming up with a game called O Run, which was an Afrocentric sci-fi RPG, and it's really really awesome. And ever since then, I've also like been trying to do initiatives in order to kind of push more things. When I was the president of the IGDN, the Indie Game Developers Network, which anybody who is a game designer, go check them out. But when I was the president there, I had also started, I had kind of pushed for them to do a scholarship for Metatopia. Metatopia is a pretty famous, for anybody who doesn't know, convention where it's a lot of playtesting, like it's for playtesting and networking. So it's literally, even as a brand new designer, you can sit down and you're like, I'm going to run my game, and Greg Stolze is going to be there, and Eloy Lasanta, and it's like all of these huge names are there to play your game, and it's not done. So, but they're there to give you advice and to help you and do all these amazing things. And like I said, as the president of the IGDN, I was the one who started the scholarship fund that was starting to get people from underrepresented communities, to we could fund them going there, and try to, kind of strangely, almost artificially, kind of put our foot on, on the scale, to be like, even if they don't end up making it, like, this is a shot at least, right? And honestly, that was, oh my god, that was a while ago that we started that, maybe 7, 8 years ago. So it's been a while. And since then, like, I think when we started, we sent like 2 people, and then I think the next year we sent 3, and I think this year, this 2023, I think they sent like 15 people. Like, it grew even after I was no longer the president anymore, which is something you want, right? It's really nice feeling. But honestly, for me, it's I'm definitely a put your money where your mouth is. I hire people that I want to see them have a voice, and I try to work with people, not just, that, work well with me, which is always good though. But like, if I see something in that person and I'm like, we need to elevate that person's voice, then I try to put myself out there for that.
Amazing. Fantastic. Any other questions? Thank you, Eloy. And thank
Not a
you, Matt, for that
problem.
question.
Thank you,
Any
Matt.
other questions? So, Eloy, how can we, so I think that's amazing too. How can we support I mean, look, there's so many things we could probably just, I don't know, take a pick, watch the video, buy one of the products, but how can we support these efforts? I mean, certainly for us, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion is one of our goals as well. So it's exciting to hear that. But what can we do to support you in general, and any of the efforts that you're doing in the game world?
Well, I mean, kind of what you said, right? Buy, money goes a long way. So, buy the products. One of my things too. It's one of those weird things. Like, I have people who are like, "Well, I'll buy it because it's your name on it," and I'll be like, "But hold on, though. You might not like it. I don't want you to just buy it just because it's me. Like, I want you to also like the thing you're buying. Like, I
Yeah.
appreciate it, but like." I don't want like artificial support. Like I want you to like what you're doing. So if anything that I've said here makes, is appealing game wise, definitely go check out any of my games. There's also quick starts available for the majority of my games. So you can always go just download one of those, check it out. If you want to do a pay what you want for $1 or whatever, that's fine. Um, a lot of what I do, because I'm not necessarily right now in league with a lot of, like, I'm no longer the president of the IGDN and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily have like an organization behind me anymore.
Yeah.
So like right now it's like, yeah, basically just support the creativity. If follow me on social medias. So if I say like, hey, I have a new Kickstarter or a new product or whatever, go check it out. I'm good. Like nobody's hurting over here for money, right? Like I've been doing it long enough that like, we're pretty good, right? So it's not like, please go buy my stuff because I'm gonna get kicked out of my house. No, please. It's like, no, it's nothing like that, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
if I seem like a cool guy and anything that I said here sounds good to you, go check out Third Eye Games or Strays of the World or Princess Friend, or check out the Central Michigan University courses that I teach. There's I do a lot of my creativity and these things because I can't not do them. Like they're so ingrained in my soul that like when I did have a regular 9 to 5 job where I ended up working. This is my very first game. Was I would go to work and I would write my games in between customer service calls, and then when I came home I would continue writing for hours. So it's like the day I was able to remove another job from the equation made it
Like
so much better because I was
open
all
the sluice
doing
gates,
the
just the
job.
creative flow just goes. Yeah, yeah. I
I
could
can
see it.
just be the creative now. But
Yeah.
like I said, even when it wasn't the easiest thing to do, I was still doing it. Like I'm never not gonna be doing creative things. So hopefully people like it and they want to come and join and support me.
Fantastic. Well, Eloy, it's been a pleasure. We're out of time. Don't go away. We
I
will
won't.
catch
I'm
up
good.
after. But this is absolutely I mean, you are a creative force. That's the best way I could put it. A force of nature, I think, for good, which and we can only be so happy to just follow in your wake with first of all, trailblazing a lot of the things that you've done. And then on top of that, sort of an unburdened creative expression that I think you're kind of my hero actually. I think what you do is amazing, and to have the freedom to do it,
Yeah.
which I think you're humble enough to acknowledge. Not everybody has, but man, what great things you can do when you get the chance. So I hope you keep teaching. I know you'll keep singing. I want to see that movie. I'm looking forward to it. um, I have no doubt it's going to happen with you. There's no way it's not going to. I don't know what streaming service, but we'll see it. We'll see it. And I'll be like, I remember when we have a YouTube channel that proves that I spoke to him before he became
I've
famous.
already been trying to figure out which credit cards I'm going to max out to pay for that thing.
Yeah. Oh, I know it's going to happen. There's no way. I don't think there's any kind of like, let's creatively try this and maybe I'll put it in a drawer with you. I feel like everything goes big one way or the other.
Try.
We absolutely are fans of your work. Look forward to seeing more from you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And please check back in with us. I say this all the time. I
Sure.
feel like I'm a broken record because I don't know if anybody ever believes me that they'll talk to me again. But we'd love to hear, your progress, especially if you get any one of these, major milestones that you've been pursuing, including the teaching, which, we have a lot of teachers in our membership. We'd love to learn more. So
All
please
right.
keep
Well,
us
thank you,
apprised.
Mike. I appreciate being here. And thank you to all the members.
Thank you. And yep, so we will put this on a channel. We'll also put the newsletter. I will be coming after you on the links just to make sure I'll try and get them right, but anything you can give me as well. And we'll make sure we'll put that both in the show notes as well as in the newsletter. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Eloy. Thank you for everybody attending. I said, don't go away. We will talk, but thanks again. And we will pick it up. We've got plenty of guests. We actually have a backlog, which is a good problem to have. So we will see you next month. Thanks, everybody.